My name is Peggy Pickett, and I was diagnosed with stage 3C high-grade serous ovarian cancer. So upon diagnosis, which happened at surgery, it was then, okay, now what? And now what meant healing from surgery and chemotherapy. And after my second treatment, I recognized that I was going to be able to survive chemo because it's a huge unknown, and I'll do anything not to throw up. And after my first treatment, I didn't, so I thought, this could be okay. I remember calling and talking with my oncology nurse and saying, I feel really good today. And she said, good. Is there anything else? And I said, nope. I just feel really good today, and I thought you'd want to know because I bet you don't hear it very often. And she said, no, I don't get this call very often, that's for sure. And she must have laughed when she got off the phone with me, but I was so astounded that I could go through this experience and have my hair start to fall out and my eyelashes trickle down onto my face, and all the rest of this is pretty strong poison they're putting in you. And yet I could actually still feel okay. So after the second treatment, I think that's when, somewhere in there, I don't know, it gets a little foggy. It's when I reached out to Ovarian Cancer Canada. And that was a real turning point because I was ready, almost, to not be alone with this. I had spent my time in my turtle shell, doing my healing and keeping myself protected. And I now felt strong enough and safe enough to start to reach out and see what other people had to say about this. I was coming from my own position of strength. So the regional director for Ovarian Cancer Canada did a follow-up phone call. And that was the real turning point. We had a lovely conversation, and I don't know what triggered it, but I told her that I didn't have a nice story. That I had a story, but not a nice story. And she said, that's okay. If you want to tell it, I have time. And probably halfway through my story, she stopped me and told me that she was angry on my behalf. And that this is what she was fighting for. Part of what she was fighting for was that other women wouldn't have my story to diagnosis. And so we chatted, I finished my story, but I found that really empowering. You know, I wasn't alone. I wasn't alone, and it was okay to be angry about not the cancer, but about the journey to diagnosis. It was okay to be angry. What did I want to do about that? So it helped me to find my voice. I'm an extrovert. I love people. I love being with people. I get my energy from being with people. Reflecting back on what I call my turtle time, where I sort of crawled within my shell and I only let a certain amount of information in. And I was cautious about where I received my information. And my family was out there. They were looking stuff up. They were watching videos of surgeries on YouTube, and different people who've posted their own blogs, and I didn't want to have anything to do with that. And when I came out of my turtle shell and realized what had happened, I reflected and went, this is not like you. Why didn't you? What is this? What has happened? And I very quickly came to the conclusion that I did what I did because it's what I needed to do at the time. And that I needed to be okay with that. 6 months later, a year later, 3 years later, I have a whole bunch of other information. And I could have, should have, would have. But at the time, I did what I could do and had to give myself afterwards, had to give myself during, even if I was aware, give myself permission that this is sufficient. But very much so afterwards, it was sufficient. And give yourself the grace to accept that and to move forward. I have a primary diagnosis of ovarian cancer. I have not yet faced a recurrence. And that's something that I think I will always live with. I'm not entirely sure I will ever feel that it's behind me. I believe this is something I will live with for the rest of my life. I didn't live with anxiety before my treatment. Or maybe I should put it more clearly. I didn't know that I lived with anxiety before I had chemo, but I live with it now. It's very much a present part of my life. And I don't know if that's just because I'm more honest with myself about it or not. But this is how I live with it. I give myself permission to feel what I feel. I also hold myself accountable to the fact that my feelings aren't necessarily true. No, they're true. They're not necessarily truth. There's a difference. They're real. I'm feeling them. They're real. But they're not necessarily truth. If I'm experiencing or feeling something that feels out of place in my response, oh, where did that come from? I need to pay attention to it. Take the time to pause and reflect. Where did that come from? And I realized that every CAT scan that I have is the day I have cancer. I've had, I don't know how many CAT scans now. I still don't have cancer. But my next one in January, I guarantee you I'll walk in that day thinking I have cancer. I know I don't. This is what I mean by feelings are true, but they're not truth. I know that that's what I feel. And therefore, I never go to a CAT scan alone anymore. My gynecologist sent me for genetic counseling. And when I met with the counselor, she was wonderful. And she explained what genetic counseling was, and that she would do a deep family history and see if I had risk factors, and then whether or not I qualified for genetic testing, which they draw a vial of blood and they send that off and they search your DNA strands to see if you have markers right now on the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. And she said, you qualify. Because you have ovarian, your father had melanoma, there's enough suspicion. Off goes the testing, comes back, BRCA1. And at that particular moment in time, at the hospital where I was, there was a narrow window for entry into a clinical trial. But you had to have high-grade serous ovarian cancer. You had to otherwise be healthy. You had to be platinum sensitive. You had to have completed all 6 rounds of chemo. Your iron levels had to be high. You needed a BRCA gene mutation. Well, I was a poster child. Long story short, I got signed onto the trial just about at the near end of the window. And I was on the clinical trial for 2 years. And I'm 3.5 years in and I've had no recurrence. In the words of my doctor, we'll never know if you did this on your own or not. But 3.5 years without recurrence means I have a good future of not having recurrence. And if I do have a recurrence, we then can treat this as a chronic disease. And that's a big word in my world. To treat this as a chronic disease, it comes back, we treat it. It comes back again, we treat it. And to take a really fatal cancer and turn it into a chronic cancer is a big, huge step towards increasing the possibility of less fatalities. So, we've not seen changes in outcomes in over 50 years. And I think, and I hope, and I pray that we're right on the cusp changing that. And Ovarian Cancer Canada is working really, really hard at changing, at advocating for that change. Not just educating women, not just educating doctors, but educating the change makers, the politicians, getting them to sit up and take notice.